Hello and welcome to the Charles River Conservancy Parkland Show. My name is Renata von Schorner. I'm the founder and president of the Charles River Conservancy, and we are talking about the Charles River parklands, but in fact we're going to talk about some parklands that are close to the parklands along the Charles and the parklands in East Cambridge in Kendall Square. And we have with us today Taha Jennings. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Taha Jennings has been with the City of Cambridge as a planner for 13 years, and the last 2 years he has been a special assistant to the city manager. So, but when he worked on Kendall Square and the open space, you were with the community development department.
Yeah, I started the project as a member of the community development department as a planner there. During the project, I actually moved into the city manager's office in a slightly different but related position.
Great. Well, as you know from this program, the parklands are such an important part of the city of Cambridge. And the fact that Kendall Square, with so much developing happening, is now thinking of its open spaces and its green spaces and how they're connected, I think will be a great addition, because I think there is right now a bit of a shortage of open space and of connections, and open spaces and pathways are much more effective if they are connected. So we will be looking at these parklands, and in particular the area where the Long Bridge, the Mass Avenue Bridge, crosses between that area and the Longfellow Bridge. That is really the area we will be looking at. And here is Taha's information. And Taha, tell us of how the Connect Kendall Square, how did that project start?
Well, the Connect Kendall Square was a open space planning competition for Kendall Square in Eastern Cambridge. And the idea of a competition and the reasoning behind it, I mean, there are a number of reasons why. And the competition itself wasn't an isolated effort. It really was a continuum of planning efforts and processes that had been going on in the area for quite some time and will probably continue. The city of Cambridge was in a unique position to be able to have funding and land available for new public open space, primarily at 4 locations around Kendall Square in Eastern Cambridge, over 5 acres in total. We wanted creative ideas on not just the open space designs and the landscape designs, but also connections, programming, placemaking, and those types of things. Shortly before this open space process, the city had conducted the Kendall Square Central Square Planning Study, or K2C2 study for short. And one of the key findings, specifically regarding Kendall Square, was that open space and really the overall public realm was a key part in creating that sense of place and identity that people wanted to see in the area.
So maybe we can look at some of the historic pictures, because our viewers might not be familiar of how different that area Kendall Square looks. It's even hard to orient oneself. Can you help a little bit with the orientation?
Right, and what we're looking at right now in the left image is the Broad Canal, which used to actually extend much deeper into the city than it currently does. The other pictures to the right are pictures along that canal.
And one landmark is the little round area, the kind of triangle with the little round park in it. That's right next to the T-stop, is that?
Yeah, that's what's currently referred to as Point Park outside of the Kendall Square T station. So you could see the where Broadway and Main Street come together and how different that area looked. It's really a fascinating story, and I would encourage people, if you're not familiar with it, to take some time and explore how that area has changed over the past few decades and is really continuing to grow.
And if you want to have more information about the Connect Kendall Square. There's also a website. What's the website?
For the actual open space study and competition, you can look at www.cambridgema.gov/Kendall Open Space, and you'll see a lot of background information on the process and the competition itself, as well as the finalist plans that were selected.
You have another historic image here of this area, which is, it's so striking of how different it is. All empty, all parking lots, and now filled with buildings, and now you're going to fill it with green spaces and connections.
Right. It's really, as I said, an extraordinary story, and a lot of lessons to be learned in terms of planning and growth. I even remember from the time I was younger, Kendall Square was a lot different. If you went there after 5 p.m., you wouldn't see a lot of activity, you wouldn't see a lot of people. Now you have lots of restaurants with cool sounding names. You have people walking down the street after 6 p.m. many
great
nights.
Food.
Great food. You have new businesses. You have new housing in the area with more to come. And so this is an ongoing process. And that idea of that street activity is really important because the open spaces play a key role in that public realm.
You mentioned earlier that there are 4 key open spaces. So they are here. Maybe you can list what the 4 are.
Right, just to help orientate people on where the new public open spaces will be. At the top of the screen is along Rogers Street, and that's about a 2-acre site. If you're familiar with the area right now, it's just totally grass. That was part of the agreement when it was handed over to the city, that it would be in a condition that at least people can enjoy it as green space until more specific designs are created. To the right, you have a parcel on First Street and Land Boulevard.
That's the triangle.
The triangle parcel, as we call it sometimes.
Close to the river. Yeah.
Yes, close to the river. At the bottom of the screen is Point Park, which we saw in an earlier image, which is next to the T station. And to the left is a parcel on Binney Street, which is also will be given to the city as new public open space, and that's along the rail line there.
And what is not shown as open space, but which some of it will be open space, is around the Volpe Center, because some of the renderings you will be showing are...
Yeah, at least one of the renderings. That's really important. The Volpe site is the site almost directly at the center of the image, where it looks pretty blank on the image. That's a very large site. There are requirements for public open space on that site. When we started this process, it wasn't really, we weren't thinking about it in terms of how likely it would be to be redeveloped. But during the process, actually, the Volpe Transportation Center came to the city with the intention of redeveloping that site. So there are a lot of opportunities for new public open space there, and the plans reflect that.
Yeah. And one thing, because we are talking about the Charles River and the parklands, the continuous green band of land, which is not owned by the city, but by the DCR, the state. But how to connect that, I think, is very much part of the plan.
Absolutely. Kendall Square has open spaces in the area and has a lot of resources in that area, the river being really the primary one. Yeah. And better connecting to those was a key focus of this study.
So tell us a bit about the process. We have some images here of public meetings and those charts, which might be hard to see, but you might just point out the various columns and what the colors mean.
Right. Well, the process started with the appointment of a East Cambridge Kendall Square open space study committee made up of residents in the area, and through that study committee, they came up with a set of design goals and a vision for the area in terms of open space. From there, we hired a competition coordinator to help run the whole competition process and manage that process. And it's a new idea for the city, using a competition to come up with an open space plan rather than going the more traditional route with an RFP and selecting a consultant in that way. Because we really wanted to encourage more teams to get involved, different types of expertise to look at the issues. We wanted to really think about placemaking, programming, creating a sense of identity. And so the competition, it was important to make sure that while it was different for the city, we maintained opportunities for a lot of public input, that it was as transparent as it could possibly be. And so that chart that you had showed earlier really was showed some of the basic steps of the competition, with the opportunities for public input and feedback highlighted. And so what we're looking at here are the competition planning and design goals. This is really a summary. They go into more detail if you go on the website or look at the final report. But this is what the study committee came up with, and it's really invaluable when we went out and asked teams that were competing to respond to this, because this is what the teams were judged on, how well they responded to these planning and design goals. And I think we're very happy with the results that came in. Everyone took a slightly different approach, and we got a variety of different strategies to meet these kinds of goals.
I know there's so much in there, but so you had how many entries in the phase 2? How many?
So there were 3 phases in the competition. I believe we started out with about 30 submittals for phase 1. And for phase 1, teams were only required to provide information about their project leadership and past examples and things like that. And that was really to encourage to be able to cast a wider net.
And then you had 4 finalists. Do you want to just list them quickly, who they are?
The 4 finalist teams were Van Valkenburg Associates, Michael Van Valkenburg Associates, Framework Cultural Placemaking, which is actually based out of Seattle, Site Lab Urban Studios, which has offices in New York and San Francisco, and Richard Burke Associates, which is here in Somerville.
So and now we're looking at just the winning proposal by Skip Burke, is that correct?
Right. This is the rendering of the framework plan or illustration of the framework plan by Richard Burke Associates. And so you can get a sense of the connections, the attention to the river. You see the large green area in the middle of the plan. That's actually part of the Volpe site that I mentioned earlier. And you see, if you look carefully, the 4 open spaces that were really the focus of the new designs.
And this, I think, is the Volpe Center proposal.
This is a rendering of what might happen in the Volpe Center. They had proposed some kind of wetland that with boardwalks where people can go and connect with nature and things like that, but also that had a stormwater function for buildings in the area.
So would the water, is this water all stormwater, or would it actually come from the broad canal from the Charles River?
The intention is that it would be stormwater that would help fill this area. And there was a lot of discussion. After the winning team was selected, there was about 2 months where they worked closely with staff on the technical aspects of all of their proposals to make sure things were realistic, make sure things could actually be implemented, and made sure that things like this, treating, I'm no stormwater expert, but that the engineering behind this idea made sense.
I believe some of the proposals looked at extending the broad canal into the area.
Right, as I mentioned before, the broad canal used to extend much further into Cambridge, and I think several of the teams recognize that and recognize the importance of strengthening that connection, even if it's not an actual physical connection, the visual connection between the broad canal and areas inland.
I'm going to push you a little bit because
no
short
problem.
on time, so you're just going through these images briefly.
Right, this is a rendering of the Roger Street Park. You could see the change in topography, seasonal use that was important to the study committee. So you see using the kind of hills as sledding hills during the winter. This is an image of the parcel on Binney Street, which had more of kind of a connects active uses and kind of adventurous uses. This is, believe, I'm not sure what this image is of, actually, but this is at Point Park, thinking of how that area, can continue to serve as kind of it's really the confluence of a lot of connections. And they also looked at, as I mentioned before, how to better connect to the river and really, use that as a stronger resource for the area. You see the triangle parcel, but as part of that thinking behind the triangle parcel, they also looked at, well, it would make sense to strengthen the connection to Front Park and therefore the river, which you see as the square parcel up above. Front Park wasn't necessarily part of this plan or study process, and there's not necessarily any plans to redesign Front Park at this time.
That's how it looks now.
This is how it looks now, but you can see how important it is in terms of public connections to the river.
Yeah. And then, of course, Broad
Canal, as I mentioned before, already gets a lot of good use with the kayaking and nearby restaurants, and there are still even more new open space being created along the edge there.
Yeah, and the kayak and canoe rental there is very popular.
Absolutely. I think that whole area, it's really seen quite a transformation in recent years.
And I know they also rent out SUPs, that stand-up paddleboard, which is very popular there. Yeah. And tell us about this rendering.
So this is, again, thinking conceptually about how improvements along the river can really play a key part in the overall open space framework and network here. So again, this is, as you mentioned, this land is not owned by the city. There are no immediate plans to do anything like this. This certainly be a large undertaking.
So
but if you look at opportunities, this opportunity create a lot of new open space along the river. And I believe historically, the plan was originally to do something like this.
What is, I think, interesting about this area and about this picture is this is land that belongs to the DCR.
Yep.
And I think for the city and DCR to work together, I think is a great goal, and already happens extensively at Magazine Beach.
Yes.
And maybe you want to speak a little bit about Cambridge doing master planning, because I think the river will be part of the master plan. I think you were part of a meeting we had with the city manager, because as the Charles River Conservancy, we really want to have Cambridge go all the way to the river, because it is part of the city and part of the parklands. So I'm delighted that the planning includes DCR land.
Absolutely. I think it's such a key part of really the city in general, the riverfront. And there are so many opportunities, not just here, but all along the river to better connect residents and better connect to the water and things like that.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see all these activities on the river.
Yeah.
And I think to have Cambridge think about that and be part of that planning, I think is so crucial. And this reminds me a little bit of North Point Park with all the lagoons and the activities. So we need to take this vibrancy of Cambridge parklands and DCR parklands and bring it upriver. Right.
I think, and as I said before, just the amount of opportunities along the riverfront, if you think about it, it's really amazing and really exciting when you think about it and you see some of the changes that have happened already.
Yeah.
And think about what's possible.
Tell us about this intriguing image.
Okay, so this is related to the previous image that showed the new green land along the walkway. This is another way of connecting to the river, kind of under that roadway. So you're
below the river here.
Below the bridge that goes above the river. Yeah.
And is the surface of the water higher than the pathway?
Higher or close, yeah. So it's kind of a sunken bridge in there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's again, there are no concrete plans
Yeah.
to do this at this point. It's conceptual at this point.
Yeah.
But you could imagine how something like this kind of connection in this area, could really, really be a huge benefit for
Yeah.
the whole community.
So here we're back at the plan, the overall plan. And so tell us what is the next step in this project?
So this process, the competition was about creating a framework. It was about creating an open space plan and helping to guide the 4 new open spaces that I had mentioned, helping guide the design, helping guide the character and role of those spaces, and help build a framework for connections and programming and placemaking and things like that. The next steps right now, the city is currently in the process of selecting a consultant or consultants to actually design those 4 new public open spaces. And so that process we're hoping to get started sometime in the next year. And as I mentioned, we have the land, we have available funding to do that. So it's really exciting to be thinking about these things and be able to start to really see some implementation happen so early on, and at some key locations.
Yeah. And what is also wonderful that Cambridge is doing that green planning and thinking of connections, because it's the connections between those
Right.
new green spaces, connections to the river, connections along the river, and as we discussed, is also connections across the river, because Cambridge touches on Boston at the Museum of Science.
Yeah.
And right now, there's really no way in any agreeable or pleasant way to go over from
Right.
Cambridge to Boston. So to connect that, I see that is not quite on this plan, although it shows Leechmere Canal.
Right,
And
and
so
definitely consideration. I think there are, really in recognition, there are a number of challenges along the river based on how development has happened
Yeah.
over the past few decades. But with that comes a lot of opportunity, and I think exciting opportunities, and we're very close to seeing some of these actually happen. So it's really an exciting time to be involved in a process like this and be able to start to see some changes continue to take shape, and really know that how much the public realm influences the overall area.
yeah, and how the public realm influences how people feel about the area.
Absolutely.
This is really wonderful. So I want to thank you for working on that,
Thank you.
of coming today. And if you just started to watch this program, you can then find it on YouTube on the Charles River Conservancy's website. The Charles River Conservancy is a 15-year-old non-profit, and we have 2,000 volunteers a year. You might have heard about the skate park that
Absolutely.
is being
I
built
remember
in
those
North
early
Point
meetings.
Park. You remember those meetings? So go and visit North Point Park for the skate park. You might have heard about swimming in the Charles. We are pursuing swimming, and we hope to be swimming in Boston as well. So a lot of things are happening, and here is how you can find information and contact Taha and the wonderful work he is doing. And we are very grateful that the City of Cambridge is launching master planning and open space planning and taking the river into account. So that is really wonderful. And thank you again for coming
Thank
today.
you. And if I could take just a few seconds just to thank the city staff that also worked very hard on this process throughout the years. The city is very fortunate to have leadership that was supportive and really actively encouraged going about this. Particular former assistant city manager for community development, the late Brian Murphy, was really instrumental in pushing this idea forward and willing to think outside of the box a little bit. The study committee that I mentioned before put in a lot of hours and work and site visits and walking tours of the area, and was really instrumental in coming up with the vision and design goals. I want to thank Don Statsny, the competition coordinator, the competition jury that he put together, the teams that participated, and especially the public, members who came out to meetings, members of the public who supported this process. It's a little different for the city, but I think the community was really behind it the whole way, and that made all of the difference. And in particular, the East Cambridge planning team, which did a lot of work very early on in securing a lot of these opportunities and making this possible. And of course, some of the landowners in the area, such as Boston Properties, Alexandria, Redevelopment Authority, that were able to provide the city with the land.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And here is information about the Conservancy. If you want to have more information, you can find us here on the web. And we look forward to working with Cambridge and bring this partnership together, this alliance together between the DCR and the City of Cambridge.
Absolutely.
Because I think together we can make really wonderful parklands. So thank you very much, Taha.
Thank you again for having me. It's great to be here.